Hello, I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Welcome on board the Eastern Express. And as always, I hope you enjoy the journey. Now, on this episode, we're zeroing in on Russia's latest shiny toy, a new weaponized rocket called Oreshnik. It is a missile system that's got eyebrows raising across Europe, but maybe not as much as those in Moscow would have wanted. Now, you might be wondering, should we all be ducking for cover? The situation might not be quite as apocalyptic as some headlines would have you believe. So without further ado, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
This is what reportedly remains of the Russian hypersonic ballistic missile codenamed Oreshnik. The one that can be seen here was used against the Ukrainian city of Dnipro in November 2024. The missile is seen as a very worrisome step forward in the arms race surrounding the war in Ukraine.
This is the first time that the debris of such a missile have been found on the territory of Ukraine. The item had not been documented by security investigators before.
It is the newest addition to Russia's arsenal and perhaps the most dangerous one.
No one in the world has such weapons yet. Yes, sooner or later it will appear in other leading countries. We know what developments are underway there, but that will be tomorrow or in a year or two.
In addition to being incredibly fast and almost impossible to intercept, according to the Russians, one of the main reasons why this missile is feared is its supposed capability to carry nuclear warheads. Together, all of this makes for a very dangerous package, to say the least. What's more, Russia will not be the only one to host the Oreshnik missile systems. They are expected to be deployed to Belarus this year. Vladimir Putin has said that this implementation could take place as early as the second half of 2025. It is a sign of the deepening military cooperation between the two countries. Minsk and Moscow constantly conduct joint drills, and Belarus has served as a staging ground for various Russian attacks against Ukraine. And as Russia is flaunting its latest missile creation prowess, Ukraine becomes its testing ground. Very recently, Ukrainian authorities launched a nationwide air raid alert over fears of Russia carrying out strikes using ballistic missiles, including the Oreshnik. While the alert was called off, this doesn't mean that Moscow will not make good on its threats in the future, with innocent lives being the price for Putin's actions.
And now, as always, it's time to take a look at the issue in greater detail. Russia, of course, has a long tradition of unveiling new wonder weapons, and every time they do, they always try to make a lot of buzz around it, diplomats whispering in hushed tones, strategists pacing nervously, and the public wondering if it's time to invest in a bunker or two. Enter the Oreshnik rocket. But is this just another page from the Kremlin's playbook of theatrical threats, or is there something more substantive to worry about? While caution is warranted, panic might be a bit premature. And while every new missile might set off a few internal alarms, the real question is whether the Oreshnik is an existential threat or just another overhyped distraction. In global politics, we're all too familiar with the art of using fear as a tool. It's not enough to simply announce a new weapon. You have to build up the narrative to convince everyone that the apocalypse is imminent. The Kremlin's latest launch is no different. It is a classic power move. Unveil something new, cast it in the shadow of imminent danger, and watch as the world scrambles for answers. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, actual policies and strategies get lost in the spectacle of political posturing. Poland, for example, now finds itself in a precarious position. On one hand, it is a country with a historical grudge against its formidable neighbor. On the other, it is a member of a security alliance that ideally would offer a collective shrug in the face of every new Russian missile. The result? A delicate balance between cautious optimism and nervous hypervigilance. Not every new weapon warrants a full-blown state of emergency. Sometimes it's just another chapter in the long story of political theater, where the headline is scarier than the substance. The truth is, while real security concerns always deserve our attention, it is equally important to recognize when fear is being weaponized for political gain. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Maciej Szopa, analyst at Defense24. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello, glad to be here.
So the Russian media has been making a lot of the Oreshnik missile. They were hailing it the next big thing when it comes to military technology. But is it really the case? What actually makes this missile so special, especially in the eyes of the Kremlin itself?
The Oreshnik missile is not the entirely new technology, not something we didn't know for many years. It is a version of a nuclear missile called Rubiež, one of the most modern ballistic missiles in Russia's arsenal. But the difference is that this missile is not carrying nuclear weapons, it's carrying multi-heads of conventional weapons. So you can terrorize a city or a country with this weaponry without being accused of using nuclear weapons. Plus, the Oreshnik missile is, as an intermediate range ballistic missile, is very hard to be shot down by air defense. For example, Iskander missiles, so short-ranged ballistic missiles, or the Kinjal, so-called hypersonic missile. It's not entirely hypersonic. They could be shot down by Patriot systems of the older version that Ukraine already has. But Oreshnik probably couldn't be shot down by a Patriot. It's going up into space, into cosmos, and is falling from the cosmos. Only very specialized and very expensive systems can counter this threat. Ukraine doesn't have this kind of systems. Only in US, Americans do have the system called TAD, but only a couple of batteries. So even US have only a couple of batteries of this. Plus, for example, Israel has the system called Arrow, which is also very expensive, and the missiles for it is very limited.
So how confident can we be that the claims of the perceived efficiency of this system are actually true? We know that Russia used to say the same thing about the Kinjal and many other weapons systems, and then all of a sudden they were actually intercepted by the Western anti-aircraft systems, air defense systems that were being used in Ukraine. And as you've mentioned, these were not the latest versions of the same systems. So would you say that the rapid re-entry velocity and the steep trajectory of the missile alone make it almost impossible to intercept? Or could this be, once again, Russia boasting about features that may or may not be true and will be verified in the course of a potential military conflict later on?
In my opinion, it is very hard to intercept, and you need, as I said, very specialized anti-missile systems with which Ukraine lacks, and many countries don't have it. So this technology, this danger exists. However, it doesn't have nuclear weapons, so the political cost of using it is lower than standard nuclear missiles, similar to Oreshnik. And also the cost of producing Oreshnik is very high. So Russians will not have as many Oreshniks as, for example, Iskanders or even Kinjals. I think they just used one missile a couple of weeks or months ago to show the West that they have this capability. And now they are really producing it and stockpiling it, and this is something to keep balance of power, to keep a card on Putin's hand that he can use in political discussions with the West. So I think maybe even those missiles will never be again used against Ukraine, but they will be a bargaining chip global politics of Russia.
So what you're saying is that Russia may be trying to hit that sweet spot between nuclear weapons, which of course you can use weapons like that to threaten people, but the credibility of those threats has been proven time and again to be fairly low given the immense cost of starting a nuclear conflict. But they also want to have a weapon which is above the threshold of credibility, i.e. this is not a nuclear weapon, but we could really use it against you. Is this what Russia is aiming for?
Yes, they want to have something that, basically works, something which they can terrorize Ukraine or Western countries without the risk of nuclear war, as you said, and without making China angry, because, as we know, China prohibited Putin from using nuclear weapons.
Well, is this weapon really revolutionary in this regard? I mean, Russia has many weapons which perhaps not of the same type, but which can be used to threaten European capitals from a large distance, and they do not have nuclear warheads. So to what extent would you say that this is really a game changer for us as NATO members? And also, does the relocation, or at least the proposed relocation of these weapons into Belarus change anything?
Well, as if for Belarus, I don't think this is a much change, because this weapon is very fast. It has a very large range. Belarus is a political issue to keep Lukashenko position stronger. It will be under control of Russia, probably. This will force US. Actually, US is already considering, or even said, that they will move some of the THAAD anti-ballistic systems to Germany to protect European territory. What was the question again?
No, the question was exactly that. To what extent is this actually a revolutionary weapon, and especially being located in Belarus, which, as you said, is more of a political move perhaps than anything else. But you've mentioned a very important thing, the relocation of the anti-aircraft systems, specifically the THAAD. Would you say that this could be the beginning of a new arms race, i.e. The Russians are developing a means of attack, we're developing and mass producing our means of defense? Does such rivalry mean that Russia will be able to sleep soundly, knowing that it will win that? Or could it perhaps bring the same results as it already did once in history, i.e. the Soviet Union engaging in an arms race and losing? Would you say that perhaps this is not such a bad thing, that we're seeing an arms race, because it will put the Russian economy under further strain?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the arms race is already ongoing for a couple of years, maybe from the beginning of COVID, maybe before that, maybe from 2014, first aggression against Ukraine. It is always cheaper to make a offensive weapon than to make a defensive system against it. However, Russia must think about many things in this arms race, not only about Oreshnik, not only about offensive systems, also about defensive ones. And Russia is much weaker country than USSR was in the 80s when it lost the first Cold War. In my opinion, Russia cannot withstand this race against the West. The only hope for Russia is Chinese help. But we are not sure if Chinese will actually help them, because China have their own interests, which is not always the same as Russia.
What about arms control? We know that, for example, the US has withdrawn from the IMF treaty. Do you think that such regulations in the near future are unlikely to re-emerge as the guiding principles for the question of the adoption and manufacture of weapons of a similar type? And also, who would you think would be the most likely to benefit from a new arms control treaty between the great powers?
Well, if we will have a new arms control treaty, probably China will never sign it. Russia cannot be, without this treaty, Russia cannot win this race, and it will most likely lose. So the benefactor, in my opinion, in reality will be Russia, as it was before current era. The West have better industrial capabilities, better economy, and far better technological level than Russians. Right now, the good example, I think, is HIMARS system with also ATACMS short-range ballistic missiles. This is a weapon Russia cannot counter. They don't have something similar on a similar level. If Ukraine would have a lot of this Western weaponry, it would already win this war. So any treaties will benefit Russia.
Especially knowing how Russia has the tendency and the long tradition of exploiting treaties, or later on to simply violating them altogether. Maciej Szopa was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you very much. It was nice to be here.
And now we're moving on to Eastern News Flash, a curated selection of all the other stories from the East that you absolutely don't want to miss. Modern warfare is reshaping military plans. Ukraine's commander-in-chief Oleksandr Syrsky says that Russia plans to recruit over 200,000 people for its drone forces by the year 2030.
Drones are increasingly becoming the future of modern warfare. It seems that Russia is learning some lessons from its war in Ukraine and has decided to go all in on drone technology, with this latest plan to recruit 210,000 people. Russia isn't the only one, however. Drones have been a vital part of Ukraine's defense systems, and Kiev itself has been investing heavily in not only drone tech, but also the ability to manufacture drones domestically. Every month, the Ukrainian commander-in-chief reviews the country's drone tactics at a monthly meeting. He says that two-thirds of Russian equipment that was destroyed in January was thanks to the operations carried out using various kinds of attack drones. Ukraine employs drones for a plethora of different uses and doesn't relegate them to just the battlefield. They are also used by the Ukrainian army to carry out reconnaissance or to make all sorts of supply deliveries.
Now, Western ship owners have apparently been making billions of dollars by selling old oil tankers. These tankers, reports say, are later used in Russia's now infamous shadow fleet of vessels.
According to an investigation carried out by portal Follow the Money, Western ship owners have made over $6 billion from selling aging oil tankers. More than 230 vessels previously owned by Western companies and firms were sold at high prices to entities which now use them to avoid Western sanctions on Russian oil. This number represents more than a third of the entire Russian shadow fleet. Greek, British and German owners were at the top of the list of ship owners who sold the tankers. Although the European Union banned the direct sale of vessels to Russian companies in 2023, the shadow fleet has been bolstering its numbers through firms registered in other countries like India or Vietnam. The Kiev School of Economics warns that the shadow fleet is now made up of more than 600 tankers, which are responsible for a staggering 70% of Russian oil exports. Since the start of the war, the fleet has contributed €800 billion in fossil fuel revenue.
The Georgian Dream Party has voted in favor of revoking the mandates of 49 opposition MPs. The move comes after the lawmakers refused to take their seats over concerns about the validity of the October 2024 parliamentary elections.
The vote by Georgian Dream MPs had brought the number of lawmakers in the Georgian parliament down from 150 to just 89. All of them now sit under the ban of the ruling party. Even though 49 of the formally elected MPs requested to resign in protest, 12 more have also refused to attend parliament sessions. The decision is yet another controversial one made by the Georgian Dream in recent months. Already, the party has created severe tensions in the country's relations with Western partners like the United States or the European Union over the government's response to pro-democracy protests. Thousands of people have been protesting the government, which has been met with a particularly brutal crackdown from the side of the Georgian police. There have even been reports of many people suffering physical violence at the hands of officers. Some Western countries have imposed sanctions on Georgia, and the EU has suspended parts of its visa facilitation agreement which targeted Georgian officials and judges.
Baku has shut down the operations of Rossotrudnichestvo, a Russian agency working directly under Moscow's foreign ministry. It is widely seen as being behind various pro-Russian rallies, demonstrations and even certain acts of sabotage.
Azerbaijan's decision to shut down the operations of the agency come amid tensions between Baku and Moscow over the December crash of an Azerbaijan Airlines flight. Baku continues to demand that Russia apologize and take responsibility for the incident, but so far the Kremlin has refused to do so. Now Azerbaijan says it will not tolerate external interference with the country's internal affairs. Azerbaijani law enforcement agencies have taken over control of the Russian house building in Baku, where the agency was located. Reportedly, the organization was found to be operating without being properly registered in Azerbaijan. Local media say that the question of why it was even allowed to operate without necessary authorization in the first place will be thoroughly investigated.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.